Good morning, everyone. It's Rabbi Akiva Males. Today is Friday. It's January 22nd. We're getting ready for Parshas Bo. I want to share a short Devar Torah with you. Every now and then in the course of reading the Torah, we come upon a mitzvah that just resonates with us. And we say, wow, am I happy to be Jewish? And I'm so happy that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave us this mitzvah. It really enhances our life and it just enriches our entire experience. And I want to share one that I have every year as we read Parshas Bo. There's numerous mitzvahs in here, all about Pesach and whatnot. There's a mitzvah in this week's Parsha that every year when I see it, I say, I'm so happy HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave us this mitzvah, and it might surprise you. It's what, according to many of the of our sources, they count as perhaps the first mitzvah that Klal Yisrael was given, and that is HaChodesh Hazeh Lachem. And you may be wondering, males, why are you so excited about HaChodesh Hazeh Lachem? All I know about HaChodesh Hazeh Lachem is that gives authority to Beis Din to establish Rosh Chodesh. Why does that get you so excited? So here's what I'll tell you. Aside from that, HaChodesh Hazeh Lachem definitely gives the authority to Beis Din to establish the Rosh Chodesh and to make the calendar. But the Chinuch points out, and other sources point this out as well, that within that mitzvah of HaChodesh Hazeh Lachem is the ability for Beis Din to make a leap year, to make a Shana Me'uberes, an Iber Yor, as we'd say in Yiddish. So why does that get me so excited? So the Chinuch explains, and this is so important. The Chinuch explains as follows, is that we all know, if you were to ask us, what calendar does the Jewish people use? We'd say it's a lunar calendar. Well, that's not entirely true. We know that the solar calendar lasts for about 365 days. The lunar calendar is roughly 354 days. That's about an 11-day discrepancy between the two. If Judaism used a purely lunar calendar, we'd have a problem because the seasons as we know them line up with the solar calendar. The lunar calendar is 11 days shorter. So if we used a pure lunar calendar, every year there would be a discrepancy of 11 days between the lunar calendar and the solar calendar. And that discrepancy would grow wider and wider and wider till eventually 365 days about pass and it would wrap up again, but then it would again start getting further and further apart. So there would be a real problem. And you know what would happen? The Yom Tovim as we know them would not occur in the seasons that we expect them to. Pesach, we know in this week's Parsha, Moshe Rabbeinu tells Klal Yisrael, Hayom atem yotzim b'chodesh Aviv. Remember that you are leaving Yetzias Mitzrayim. The Exodus is taking place in the spring. And the Mefarshim tell us that Pesach has to be celebrated in the spring. If we had a pure lunar calendar that every year there was an 11-day discrepancy, soon Pesach wouldn't be being celebrated in the spring. It would be in the summer, and then in the winter, in the fall. It would be completely out of what we're used to. Can you imagine that? The school calendar, how different that would end up looking, what we have to teach the children at different points of the year. Could you imagine celebrating Pesach in the winter, in the summer? It's unheard of. It's not just Pesach. We know that Sukkot is supposed to be the Chag HaAsif in the time of the harvest. That's fall time, after the summer. So again, if you didn't have a way to compensate for and somehow make the lunar and solar years become closer, every year there would be an 11-day discrepancy between the two, and Sukkot wouldn't be in the fall, soon it would be in the winter. Imagine living in a locale where Sukkot is in the winter, there's blizzards going on, feet of snow. Oh my gosh, what would that look like? And then it would be in the summer, blazing hot. That would be incredibly difficult. Hanukkah, now again, Hanukkah is not found in the Torah. That's something which occurs in the time of the second Beis Hamikdash, but we always associate that to be in the winter time. Could you imagine if that 11-day discrepancy is kicking in every year, and then Hanukkah, we find it in the summer? Imagine how bizarre that would be. So what do we do to compensate? So the Chinuch tells us that implicit within the mitzvah of HaChodesh Hazeh Lachem is that Beis Din is supposed to be the masters of the calendar, is this idea that we can make this Shana Me'uberes, add a 13th month every so often, every couple of years to our lunar calendar, and that extra month will enable us to compensate and keep the two cycles, the lunar cycle and the solar cycle, keep those two calendars closely aligned with one another, so to make it that our Yom Tovim do fall out in the seasons in which they are supposed to. Pesach will be in the spring, Sukkot will be in the fall. That's what we were able to do. HaChodesh Hazeh Lachem gave that power to Beis Din, and because of that, we are able to have this recognition every year as the seasons roll around. What Yom Tov do we associate with that? And it's beautiful that it plays such an important role in our lives. And you can only scratch your head and wonder how different Jewish life would be if we were not given that power. And we don't have to wonder. We don't have to really think what it would look like, because there are other nations and other religions in this world that do use a pure lunar calendar. And we could look at what happens to them and just think about the chaos this would bring to our own lives if we had this. I want to share one example with you. I'll read it. It's very short. A couple of lines from an article that appeared in a European news site a couple of years ago. We know that our cousins in the Muslim world, they have a pure lunar calendar. They do not have a system in place to compensate for this 11-day discrepancy between the lunar and solar calendars. And therefore, their holidays are not aligned with any one season. And this really becomes a big deal for them during the month of Ramadan, because in the month of Ramadan, it's a month-long period where they need to fast between sunrise and sunset. Let me read to you just a couple lines from this article. Fasting for longer, the challenge of Ramadan in Europe. Ramadan is a holy month of restraint observed every year by Muslims around the world, when they must refrain from eating and drinking between sunrise and sunset. But since the Islamic calendar follows the lunar cycle, the month of Ramadan gets pushed back 11 days every year. Because of this, Ramadan is now shifting from the shorter winter days of fasting to the much longer and warmer summer days. For Muslims living in European countries and closer to the Arctic Circle, Ramadan is becoming more and more challenging every year. In countries like Finland and Norway, the sun sets for barely 3 hours. That means Muslims have to fast for more than 20 hours, after which they only have a few hours to eat, drink, and prepare for another long stretch of fasting. Now you may ask, what's the big deal? Yom Kippur, we fast for 25 hours as we do on Tisha B'Av, but that's one day. Imagine this is going on sunrise to sunset for an entire month. This could be very, very challenging to the life of a devout Muslim. So listen to this. So it sounds like later in the article, they started asking a question to their religious authorities, to the ones who could rule on such questions. Some Muslims have raised concerns over whether any exception can be made to allow them to fast according to the time in Mecca, Islam's holiest city in Saudi Arabia, where the fasts are observed for around 13 hours. So listen to the shaila. The question is, we're living in Norway, we're living in Finland. The fast is going to be for 20 hours for a month. Instead of fasting according to local time, can we fast according to the time in the capital of Islam, which is in Mecca? Can we do that? That'll make it a much more manageable span of time to fast. So the answer that comes back to them from Muslim authorities, religious authorities, was, according to well-known Muslim scholar, he quotes a name here, I don't know how to fully pronounce, as long as there is visible sunrise and sunset, then Muslims should fast according to the times of the country they're living in. So his answer back to them was, it depends on the locale, not on what's going on in Mecca, but based on your locale. So you're right, it's inconvenient. In the summer now that it's Ramadan for an entire month, you got to fast between sunrise and sunset, but that's what's got to happen. So it could be 20 hours a day of fasting for an entire month, but nonetheless, that's what they have to do. I look at this and I say, Baruch Hashem, for HaChodesh Hazeh Lachem. The mitzvah that we have in the Torah, this week's Parsha, that gave based in the ability to make a Shana Uberes, to make that leap year, that 13th month, that extra month of Adar that pops up every so often, not this year, but very often. So that gives us the ability to have our Yom Tovim when we expect them, in the seasons we expect them. And there's not this constant shift that has to go on in our life, and to now readjust, oh my gosh, how are we going to celebrate Sukkot in the winter? How are we going to celebrate Pesach in the summer? It would totally force us to adjust our lives and our plans in ways that we can't even wrap our heads around. But thank God we don't have to do that, because of this mitzvah, V'chodesh hazeh lachem, in which we are able to keep our lunar calendar and our solar calendars very aligned. So our Yom Tovim occur and are celebrated in the seasons that we expect them to be. So as we read the Parsha this week, and we're looking for reasons to say, Baruch Hashem, thank God that he gave us the Torah and he gave authority to our Rabbanan, to Chazal, to do what they need to do. Here's another reason to say Baruch Hashem when we read HaChodesh Hazeh Lachem. Have a good Shabbos, everyone.